first chapters of Exodus tell us that the people of Israel are oppressed by Egypt. Israel, of course, came to Egypt through Joseph because he had become viceroy there after he had first been sold into slavery. We will come back to this in another video. The Pharaoh who had now come to power did not know Joseph, and Israel began to become a great nation and even more powerful than Egypt. For that reason, Pharaoh decided to oppress Israel with a heavy hand because he was afraid that Israel would join the enemies if war broke out. But no matter how Pharaoh tried to oppress the people with hard work, Israel continued to grow, and the fear increased among the Egyptians, and they made the people work even harder. Pharaoh even decided to kill the newborn boys to stop their growth and ordered them to be thrown into the Nile to drown. At this time, Moses was also born, but he was placed in a basket and placed on water so that he would not drown. And so Pharaoh's daughter found Moses and decided to raise him as her own son. We can also learn a lot from Moses' life, because he was not the nicest person on earth, and yet God used him. There will also be a video of this later. To go a little further in time, Moses eventually leaves the palace and flees to another country. This is where Moses gets married and tends his father-in-law's cattle. In the field, Moses is called by God to lead his people Israel out of Egypt, and with a sputter, Moses agrees. A few days later, he stands before a new Pharaoh, because Exodus 2 verse 23 states that the king of Egypt had died. So most likely he and Moses did not know each other. After Moses was called, God told him to go to Pharaoh together with Aaron to ask if Israel could be sacrificed to their God. But Pharaoh refused and even made the people work harder, which made the Israelites angry with Moses and Aaron because Pharaoh had gone. But Moses and Aaron later had to return to Pharaoh and perform a miraculous sign. Aaron threw his staff on the ground and it became a serpent. But Pharaoh's magicians did this too, and their rods also became snakes. Yet something special happened then, because Aaron's snake ate the other snakes. But Pharaoh was not impressed. The first plague. Then Moses and Aaron ran away, and God told them to go to the Nile River the next morning, where Pharaoh will also be. They did so, and said to Pharaoh, "Because you would not listen to me, you will know that I am the Lord." And Aaron stretched out his rod over the Nile, and it was turned into blood, and the fish died, and the water stank, so that the Egyptians could no longer drink the water. But Pharaoh's magicians did the same, and Pharaoh was not impressed. So 7 days passed, and the Egyptians looked for drinking water, because they could not drink from the Nile. The second plague. After those days, Moses and Aaron went again to Pharaoh to ask whether they might let Israel go and serve the Lord. But Pharaoh refused, and Aaron stretched out his rod, and frogs came up and covered all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh's magicians also lifted up their staffs, and the frogs also climbed up. But Pharaoh called Moses and Aaron and asked them if they would take the frogs away from him and from his people, and then he will let Israel go to serve their God. And Moses said that the next day the frogs would gather together, and so it happened. And the frogs came from everywhere and gathered in great heaps, and the land reeked of them. And when Pharaoh saw that he was delivered from the frogs, he was hardened and did not let Israel go. The third plague. And God commanded Aaron to stretch out his rod to smite the dust of the earth, and all the dust in the land of Egypt became gnats. And the mosquitoes came upon men and upon beasts. And Pharaoh's magicians tried the same thing, but they could not succeed. And the magicians said to Pharaoh, "This is the finger of God." But Pharaoh hardened himself and did not listen. The fourth plague. And the next day Moses and Aaron went again to Pharaoh and asked that the people might go to serve their God. And they warned, "If this is not allowed, gadflies will come. They will be everywhere, even on the ground where you stand. But I will separate the province where my people live, and no gadfly will be found there. So I will separate your people from my people." And Pharaoh refused to let the people go. So it happened on the next day that the Lord brought a great swarm of flies into all the land of Egypt, and the land was destroyed. But the province of Goshen, where the children of Israel dwelt, was not affected. Then Pharaoh called Moses and Aaron and said, "Go, sacrifice to your God in the land." But Moses said, "It will not be good to do this, for we are an abomination to the Egyptians, and they will stone us if we sacrifice to our God. Therefore let us travel into the desert for 3 days to offer sacrifices as our God wishes." And Pharaoh approved, provided they did not travel too far, and that they also prayed for him. And Moses went away from Pharaoh and prayed to God, and he answered his prayer, and took away the flies from Pharaoh, from his servants, and from all the land of Egypt. Not one fly remained. And when Pharaoh saw this, he hardened himself, and did not let Israel go to sacrifice to their God. The 5th plague. Thus said the Lord to Moses, "Go to Pharaoh and tell him that he will let my people go to serve me, and if not, I will smite your cattle with pestilence." So Moses went to Pharaoh, but he did not let Israel go. And it came to pass on the morrow that God sent a very grievous pestilence upon the beasts of the Egyptians throughout all the land of Egypt, on the donkeys, the oxen, the horses, the camels, and all the flocks, and all the beasts of the Egyptians. All the beasts of the Egyptians were sick, and they all died. But the beasts of the children of Israel remained healthy. None died that day, not even one beast. But Pharaoh refused to let the people go, and did not listen to Moses, as the Lord had spoken. The 6th plague. And Moses went again to Pharaoh, and he scattered ashes in the air before Pharaoh, and the ashes became sores on all men and beasts. But Pharaoh hardened himself, and would not let Israel go, despite all the plagues that had hitherto been. The 7th plague. Then Moses had to go again to Pharaoh, and he said, "Thus says the Lord, the God of the children of Israel, let my people go, that they may serve me. For this time I will send my plagues on yourselves, on your servants, and on your people, so that you may know that there is none like me on the earth. I could have struck you and your people with my hand, but I have left you alive to demonstrate my power to you, so that my name may be known in all the earth. Are you still resisting not letting my people go? Well, then tomorrow at this time there will be heavy hail like never before in all of Egypt. Get yourself, your servants, your people, and your livestock to safety, for everything that is out in the field will die when the hail falls." And every servant of Pharaoh who was afraid of the word of the Lord gathered his servants and his cattle and fled into their houses. But those who were not afraid left everything in the field. Then God spoke to Moses, "Stretch out your hand toward heaven," and Moses did so, and the Lord gave thunder and hail, and even fire shot down to the earth. All this happened in a very heavy shower over the whole land of Egypt, which had never happened before. And the hail struck hard and killed everything that was in the field, the animals, people, the crops of the fields, trees. Yes, all Egypt was struck. Only the province of Goshen was spared, as the Lord had spoken. And Pharaoh called Moses and Aaron and said, "I have sinned this time. The Lord is righteous, and I and my people are guilty. Pray to the Lord that there will be no more thunder and hail, for I will let you go." Then Moses went out of the city and spread out his hands to the Lord. The thunder and hail ceased, and the rain ceased to pour down upon the earth. When Pharaoh saw this, he hardened his heart and did not let the Israelites go, as the Lord had spoken. The 8th plague. And the Lord said unto Moses, "Go to Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart and the heart of his servants, so that I may do these signs before you, that you may tell it to your children and your grandchildren. Then you will know that I am the Lord." So Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and asked again, "Let the people go, that they may serve the Lord. But if you refuse, the Lord will bring locusts into Egypt tomorrow. They will cover the whole land, and your houses will be filled with them, such as your forefathers have never seen. They will eat everything that the hail leaves, and they will devour your whole land." Then Moses and Aaron went away from Pharaoh, and the servants said to Pharaoh, "How long will this man bring us disaster? Don't you realize that Egypt is lost?" And Moses and Aaron were called, and Pharaoh said, "Go, serve the Lord your God. But who will go?" And Moses, "Behold, we will go with our young and our old, with our children, with our fathers and with our mothers, with our livestock and with our herds, because we have a feast to the Lord." And Pharaoh said, "Let only the men go, that they may serve the Lord, for this is what you have requested." And Moses and Aaron were sent away from Pharaoh. Then God commanded Moses to stretch out his hand over the land of Egypt, And the Lord sent an east wind into the land all day and all night. And in the morning the wind brought the locusts and covered all the land of Egypt. Never before had there been such a great swarm of locusts, nor ever will there be again, for they covered the land, and it was darkened, and they devoured every herb, the fruit, the trees, and all that the hail had left, locusts up. Then Moses and Aaron were called to Pharaoh in great haste, and he said, I have sinned against your God and against you. But forgive me this one sin, and pray to the Lord your God, that he may take away this plague from me. And Moses went away from Pharaoh, and prayed unto God, and the Lord raised a great west wind, and lifted up the locusts, and cast them into the Red Sea. And there was not one locust left in all the land of Egypt. But the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he did not let the children of Israel go. The ninth plague. Then Moses stretched out his hand toward heaven, and darkness came over all the land of Egypt for 3 days. No one saw each other, and for 3 days no one rose from his place. But all the Israelites had light in their habitations. Then Pharaoh called Moses and said, Go and serve the Lord. Only your cattle must remain behind, but your small children may come with you. But Moses said, You must make sacrifices and burnt offerings available to us, so that we may serve our God, and our livestock will also go with us, leaving nothing behind. But the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and did not let the people of Israel go. And he said to Moses, Depart from me, and beware lest you come before me again, for next time you will die. Moses said, You have just spoken, I will not see you again. Threat of the 10th plague. And Moses heard from God that he will bring one more plague on Egypt, and after that Israel may go. But first every Israelite must ask for silver and gold objects that they can take out of Egypt, and the Lord will give favor in the sight of the Egyptians to give them. And the Lord also be against Moses, that he will go through Egypt this night, and will slay every firstborn, from Pharaoh even to the maidservant, and even the firstborn of every living creature shall be slain that night. But nothing will be done to Israel, so that the Lord will make a distinction between the Egyptians and the Israelites. The Passover. And the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, that this month is the beginning of the year for them. On the 10th day of this month, everyone must take 1 lamb per family, and there must be no shortage of this lamb, a male of 1 year old. And you shall keep it until the 14th day of this month, and then all Israel shall slaughter the lamb. And they shall take its blood and put it on the doorposts and lintel. And they also received instructions for eating the lamb to keep this day as a day of remembrance, because the Lord delivered Israel from Egypt. And the blood at the door will be a sign to the Lord, so that he will pass over that door tonight and not kill the firstborn here. And so Moses and Aaron told the people as God had commanded, and the people listened and did as it was said. The 10th plague. And it came to pass in the night that the Lord slayed all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh, even to the firstborn of the captive, even to the firstborn of the cattle. And Pharaoh rose up by night, and all his servants, even all the Egyptians. And they all cried out, because there was a dead man in every house. And Pharaoh called Moses and Aaron by night, and they, Get out of my country. Take all your people with you, all your livestock and your herds, and serve the Lord. And the Egyptians also pressed strongly against the people so that they would quickly disappear from the land, otherwise they would all die. And all Israel went with their garments and dough, as Moses and Aaron had said, and the Egyptians also gave them many vessels of silver and gold, as they had asked them. So Israel, more than 600,000 men, without counting women and children, set out on their way to an unknown land. Moses had led the people to the Red Sea as the Lord had commanded him. And there they sat, waiting for what was to come, everyone just doing his or her thing. The Pharaoh had regretted it and is on his way to the Red Sea with 600 of his best chariots and their officers to bring the people back to Egypt, because who else would have to work for them? And when Pharaoh came near, the children of Israel stood up slowly and saw a great cloud of dust approaching quickly. And soon they ran to Moses and said to him, Weren't there enough graves in Egypt for us to die in the desert? "Why did you bring us? Didn't we tell you to leave us alone so that we could serve the Egyptians instead of dying in the desert?" But Moses said, "Do not be afraid and have courage, for the Lord has provided for you. You will never see the Egyptians who arrive there again. The Lord your God will fight for you, and you must be silent." And the Lord said unto Moses, "Tell the people to pull down their tents and lift up your rod and stretch out your hand over the sea and divide it, and the children of Israel may pass through the middle of the sea." And further said the Lord, "I will send the Egyptians after you, and I will be honored at the expense of Pharaoh and his servants, and at the expense of all his army and all his horses, and all the land of Egypt will know that I am the Lord." Then an angel of God came between the Israelites and the approaching Egyptians, and the angel and the pillar of cloud created darkness, so that neither could come near the other. And Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord brought a mighty east wind, and the water was parted, and there were 2 walls of water came into existence, and all the children of Israel walked through the midst of it, and it was dry. And the Egyptians pursued after the children of Israel, and they also passed through the mouth of the sea. But when the day came and the first rays of the sun came out, the Lord looked down on the Egyptians and threw Pharaoh's army into confusion. And he caused the wheels of their chariots to sink in the mud, and the Egyptians said, "Let us flee from Israel, for the Lord fights against us." Then the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the sea, and the waters will return over Pharaoh and his servants." And Moses did as God commanded him. And at dawn the walls of water collapsed, and the waters returned to their original place, and Pharaoh and his army were buried in the midst of the sea, and not one of them remained. So the Lord delivered Israel from the Egyptians, and the Israelites saw the dead washed up on the shore of the sea. And all the people of Israel praised God and were faithful to him and to his servant Moses, who had gone before them. And the people of Israel went further into the wilderness with Moses as their leader on the way to a land flowing with milk and honey. We at Bible Teller wish you all the best. Be sure to keep an eye on us for more biblical teaching and stories. Start your free membership on YouTube by clicking on the subscribe button, and see you next time.